my screen here. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. I work with Insight. Some of you have probably talked to me or emailed with me. My name is Deb Watson, or with my business partner, Grace Migliaccio. We are the HR expertise that is out there to try to help you with some of your questions and issues, whether strategic or tactical. And it's been our pleasure to work with the Insight portfolio companies for over the last year. And I'm very excited to get through this presentation today because I think, as Christina said, one of our most common questions is, we need an HRIS, what would you recommend? And as with many things in life, that seems like a very simple question to ask, but it's a rather complicated answer. And the marketplace in HRIS is very big. So what I'm going to go through today is, how do you get to the answer of what HRIS should I select? We will have time for questions at the end. This is set up as a webinar, so I'm going to go through all of the slides and all of the content, and then Christina will help me facilitate a Q&A where we can address any questions that might come up during this process. Obviously, if there's anything additional after you go away, you think about it for a while, you can always reach Grace and I at HR on Call in the email box, and we'd be happy to weigh in on any additional issues or questions that you might have. So with that, I will get started. So how do you go about doing this? You think you're ready for an HRIS, or as we found out from the poll, many people already have an HRIS, but they're not sure it's the right one. So how do you select this, and what do you think about? There are actually 5 phases to this process. It's not something that you should take lightly, and it's something that you should really put some thought into, particularly if you're in that instance that you're going to be changing out an HRIS, because you have a data transfer in the middle of all of that, and potentially integration issues that go with it. So how do you do this? Obviously, being a member of the Insight portfolio world, you are growing and expanding, whether customer bases, lines of business, or through acquisition. And if you are feeling like there is a lot of paper going on, whether it's in reporting, whether it's onboarding, if it's just trying to look information up, you're going through paper files, or even, you were in a situation where you had a lot of paper and it wasn't a big deal because everybody was in the office, and now all of a sudden everybody's dispersed at home and you don't have access to it. If you're really feeling like there needs to be an electronic solution, this is the time to really think through an HRIS. So, all right, you think you need one, but how do you figure out which one it is? And again, that is the entire purpose of this webinar, and I'm going to take you through 5 phases as to how you do this. So it is a big decision, and I know our first instinct is to pick up the phone and call our colleagues and say, hey, I need an HRIS, which one do you like? And although that is an important part of the process, you actually do not do that until phase 3. So there is a lot of planning and thought that has to happen before you get on the phone and start collecting, your buddy's best HRIS, because it really is going to be different for each organization, and it's something that you need to think through. So the 5 phases are planning for what you need and can afford, building a cross-functional selection team, identifying and reviewing HRIS systems and their options, making your choice and negotiating a deal, and then getting ready for implementation, which is a whole nother piece. And honestly, this is about a 6-month process. I know, we often think, well, gee, I want to get this done, I need it right away, etc. But to be realistic, especially since you're going to be doing this along with all your other work, it is best if you plan this out. And again, think about 6 months to be realistic. So how do you start? This actually starts with HR, and this is a key position. I don't advocate that you collaborate in phase 1. This is where the HR leader, who is also going to be the HRIS selection team project lead, gets, frankly, your head organized around what this system needs to do for the organization. And you are the primary user of this system. So HR has the most invested in this system. So you really should be the one who thinks it through and gets organized. I feel so strongly about taking the time to do this that we recently published a blog, which hopefully most of you were able to see, included some great collateral around how do you get yourself organized for this piece. But this is often a piece that is shorted, and I actually think it's a foundational step in the process. So what you do is you think about your HRIS and you think about what your project parameters are. And when you complete these two steps, what you're doing, and again, this is HR, the project lead, you're developing a model. Like, what is it you think this HRIS needs to do? And you think about today, but also your growth, and again, is it international? Is it just national? Is it primarily a remote workforce, or is it a combination? Are you in a situation where you may have some sort of a call center, which is a different type of workforce versus maybe software developers? So you have to think through that. You need a ballpark budget. At some point, somebody's going to ask you for a number, and you need to have a feel for what you can spend and what you think this is going to cost. And then you also need to have a timeline, which is a by when date. And you work backwards. So if you want an HRIS by next March, then you need to work backwards to think through your implementation plan. And then, as I said, it's 6 months to get through this initial process. So you probably need to start this planning phase and the subsequent phases now if you want it by March 1st. And again, as the primary model, what this does for the HR leader is that this makes sure that you are organized in your thought process so that you can then build this out in a more robust fashion when you get to the selection team in phase 2. So this is not a highly detailed plan. It's more of, in my mind, I think of it as an outline of what the key features are and needs and the budgeting piece for this organization. So in order to do this, you need to start thinking and making lists or charts or however you think best. So you need to think about and capture your current needs. So what are those current needs, and prioritize those needs, because you're not going to get everything that you want. That's the reality of systems. You need to think about your future growth plans. And I've already talked a little bit about those things, but are you going to double in size? Are you going to triple in size? How much is acquisition? How much is origin? Are you pulling in international, or is it just national? What does your workforce look like? Things like that. Is there anything that you don't need? Maybe you have a robust performance management system already, and so you're not going to need your HRIS to handle that. Or maybe you have a robust system and you're going to need your HRIS to talk to it, which is equally as important. How ready is your organization for more sophisticated decision-making and talent planning? Your HRIS is going to be a robust reporting system for you. It's going to allow you to inform the business about the people needs so that you can make plans for how you manage and grow your talent. But quite frankly, if your organization isn't ready for that, maybe that's not going to be a huge feature that you're going to focus on. Then the other piece is, what else do you have? Everybody's got payroll. That's what everybody starts with. And so are you willing to change your payroll system if it makes sense to be the same organization as your HRIS? Or are you going to be talking about an integration, and you need to make sure your HRIS integrates with payroll? And then finally, you need to know what your must-haves are, your nice-to-haves, and your wish list. That if you could find the perfect system, what would be available? And again, there were attachments in the, they'll be in the appendix as far as some sample features to get you thinking about what should my HRIS do. And there's some additional questions that are in the appendix about going even deeper into how you get yourself organized and develop this model. So again, when you're thinking about the HRIS system, The HRIS is your foundational system for everything else. It's not your first system. Payroll is always your first system, because if you can't pay your people, then what are we doing in business, and how are you going to get them to work for you? But that is not a foundational system. When you bring your HRIS in, payroll becomes another module, or it becomes another integration. If you are a robust recruiting organization, you're growing by origin growth, you need to bring people on regularly. You may have an applicant tracking system that has an onboarding module. Those often come together. Again, that needs to work seamlessly with your HRIS. Sometimes the same company provides those. Sometimes you don't want to go that way. For learning management, succession planning, growth, career ladders, and development of your workforce, again, especially as a fast-growing company, you often want to promote from within. It can be one of your selling points. You may have a learning management system, again, usually goes with a succession planning module, that either A, is a part of your HRIS as a module, or B, you need the integration. And then you have other pieces, Ben admin, compensation, reporting, engagement and recognition activities, all of which need to connect with and speak to your human resource information system, or be a part of that system. Because of the foundation of the reporting that's going to come out of this, you do want to make sure that these systems all talk together, which is why IT is going to be a part of your selection team. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, but it's a bit of a heads up on phase 2 when you're building your selection team. So think about your project parameters. And again, this is HR lead. This is you getting organized. So what's your budget? What can you realistically spend? Do you have a current system? Many of you in the poll said you already have a current system. So what does that cost? That's kind of your baseline. And then whether you have a system that isn't working for you, or you don't have a system, where can you increase workload? Where can you increase workload efficiencies? Where are the value adds in reporting and oversight? Where can you improve your candidate experience? In today's environment, if you are emailing new hire paperwork, versus having it launch with a welcome email coming out of an applicant tracking system or an onboarding module, think about that experience to your candidate as they're considering other jobs. What's that message? What are your technology limitations and preferences? And again, this is where you're going to want IT support and discussion to make sure that the HRISs you look at are something that can be supported. Are you transitioning, or do you have your first HRIS? The reality is that if you already have a system, it's going to be a little harder, because now you have a data cleanup and a data migration. If it's your first system, it's a little bit easier because you don't have those pieces, but you need to think more about your workflows. You're building your workflows from the ground up. Again, if you're transitioning system, you probably have some workflows that you know you need to fix. And then are there any other implementation challenges or considerations that you need to think through and discuss with IT and the selection team? And then finally, timing. You need to determine your by when date for when you want your HRIS and work your timeline backwards. This planning phase, if you do it thoroughly, is about 6 months. Most HRIS systems, they will tell you anywhere from 60 to 90 days is the implementation timeline, where they will provide you a project manager and support. So this can be an 8 to 9 month process from start to finish. So part of that will be, figuring out when that needs to be implemented. So when do you need to start this planning process, and just work it backwards. All right, so now you as the HR lead, you've got your model, you've got yourself organized, you're ready to bring in more people and collaborate and build this out further. So now you want a cross-functional selection team. This is not a system that you want to decide on in a vacuum. There are other departments that it impacts. Obviously IT, it's going to impact finance from the payroll perspective or the cost perspective. It's going to impact any recruiting function that you have, and it's going to potentially impact your operations folks, depending on what sort of reporting and other feedback they would like. It may impact a training department, whether that's an outside vendor or an internal department. So you want these stakeholders to be on your team. The other piece of it is you want supporters. In order to put this system in place and have it truly used to its fullest advantage, you need people who are out there talking it up. And not just, from oh, this is good, we need it, but talking about the merits of the system, how this is going to help, and be your cheerleaders. So this group of people not only provide insight for you and help you, but they're also going to help you sell it. A part of this piece we're going to talk about is defining the team member roles. Your selection team is not all equal votes. It's not a democracy, and everyone needs to know what their role is. So you need to build your team, and then you need to finalize your project parameters. So there's, again, 2 pieces to phase 2. So when you're building your critical stakeholder, you're building your selection team, you want to bring in a decision maker level finance and a decision maker level IT people. They're critical. You want finance in the room with you from a cost perspective, and depending on how much they control payroll, they often run payroll. And obviously from an IT perspective, for all of the reasons of making sure that what you're selecting makes sense, plus they're systems people. Who else would have a big enough stake in the HRIS in order to do some work? Because again, being on the selection team, there's work involved, there's homework. And then who else should be on the team as far as providing insight, suggestions, and other value adds? So let's go further into these 2 pieces. So building your team. You as the HR project leader, the person who built the model, you are the lead. So you are the one who's going to head up this system. They're going to head up the selection team. You're the most deeply invested. You want to have both HR and non-HR. Again, this is an HR system, but it impacts the whole company. So you do want key stakeholders. As we've talked about, you want finance and IT for cost, payroll, and system compatibilities. Then you need to think about your recruiting, training, engagement, and operations pieces. Are you linking to an applicant tracking system? Are you working with operations on developing internal promotion tracks? What sort of reporting do they want? Turnover is a common one, but there's lots of reporting that you can get out of an HRIS. So what are the things that would help inform the business making the decisions? But control this. You want a minimum of 3, but no more than 7 people. The selection team is not a steering committee, it's a working team. So you need to keep this at a size that is easy to manage and doesn't get unwieldy. Once you've invited and identified the players, you want to invite them and have a kickoff meeting where you define the roles and responsibility. So you really have 2 large buckets. You have decision-making authority versus those informing the decision. Who's going to be under RACI, who's going to be responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed. The ultimate responsibility and accountability is with the HR project lead. Finance and IT are going to have a tremendous amount of weight in the decision. And the rest of the group, training, engagement, operations, they're going to be consulted and they're going to provide information, but no disrespect to those functions. They're not as directly invested in this as HR will be. And so they may not have full voting level. So again, you want to make sure you're very clear on the team as to who's going to make the decision. This is the other piece, and I see this mistake a lot. The HR project leader needs to drive the final decision. It is tempting to select a less expensive system. And I understand the why, especially if you're in growth mode, you're working on profit margins, and this is a big expense. But you need to be careful that you don't sacrifice critical features that will enable you to grow, that will develop more robust workflows, and that will help you be a better organization for your people and your candidates to save 10 or 15 or 20 or even $30,000. So, and this is where you need to work with finance. Make sure that, again, it's an important part of the decision, but I guess my message is make the right decision, which includes cost. Don't just make a price-based decision. you need to, the system's too important to just make it about what's, what's cheapest and easiest to implement. Finally, you need to pull your parameters together. So with your selection team, you're going through the model. So again, you've gotten your head organized, you're going to go through the model, you're going to walk them through the steps in phase 1 to enhance the model. So in essence, the things that you did first that I went through in phase 1, you're going to take the selection team through that also. So they're going to talk about pricing, they're going to talk about features, you're going to talk about what your must-have, nice-to-have, and wish list is with the selection team, and you build out what you're looking for and the project parameters even further. And this is how you get everybody organized for when you're going to do your demos. And all of this should be captured by the HR project lead on a spreadsheet, because this spreadsheet is going to be your foundation for rating the systems and collecting the information for each of the meetings and demos that you have. And you want a rating system. I'm a big fan of 1 through 5. That way you've got a little bit of flexibility between a 1 and a 2. A 3 is your meets, a 4 and a 5. 1 to 3 is also okay. Again, I like 1 to 5, but you need to make sure that people are rating what they're seeing, so there's no misinterpretation. There is also a sample HRIS features list, again, to help you build this master spreadsheet of features. On your master spreadsheet, and again, you can do this in Excel. I think that's the easiest way to do it. You've got to have your firm's must-haves. So these are the features that your selection team has built out further from your model about what is critical in this HRIS. What do you have to have? Where are you from a cost and budget perspective? And again, a range is fine. Ease and cost of upgrades. This is an area where sometimes the HRIS firm, it can be a hidden cost. They may start charging for upgrades, and how often do they happen and how easy are they to install? How do they price on users? Again, another hidden cost. Sometimes there are an open number of licenses or open number of users, and sometimes there's limits, and you need to think about, what those are going to be. Security, and again, this is where I would use IT specifically to help build out what are those questions and features. Ratings on ease of navigation, search features, general look and feel, and all of that. What is the customer service support? Some of your vendors are going to assign you a single account executive that you call for all your issues. Other HRIS vendors are going to send you to a call center. I don't know if that's a big deal to you or not. Include your nice to haves and your wish list items as your tiebreakers. Again, your must haves are already on there. A place on this master spreadsheet for any negatives or limitations of the system, and then to collect anecdotal comments. So your master HRIS spreadsheet has all these key features, and then you literally take those key features and put them in an HRIS assessment form with a little block to the side where everybody on the selection team will put their rating. And then that way, when you collect the insight of the people when they saw the HRIS and you put it back into your spreadsheet, it just lines up beautifully, makes it much easier to put together. So again, build your spreadsheet and then turn all of those questions and features into an assessment form that each selection team member will complete during the demo. And then you'll put it all right back into the spreadsheet so you can start to see, where these systems, you develop your top 1 to 3, or maybe you literally see your 3 just based on that information. That's how you keep everybody on the same page when you start looking at demos. Okay, so now phase 3. Good news, this is where you start calling for those referrals that I know everybody wanted to call right away. So now you are going to start narrowing the field on your HRIS systems. There are a huge number of HRIS systems out there. And that's why the question of, well, which one is best for me is hard to answer. Obviously, number one, I don't know, because I don't know what's most important to you and your firm for today, but also to grow. And then number 2, it is a huge marketplace. So most HRIS systems contain similar data fields. An HRIS is your foundational people system So what it collects, the information is very, very similar. But a lot of these systems have a focus or a sweet spot that is their differentiator when you're out there looking for it. So this is why you want to finalize your project parameters, including your must-have, nice-to-have, and wish list before you start looking. That way, again, you're organized, the team is organized, and you've got a organized platform for your rating when you start looking at this. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to narrow the field of HRIS choices, and then you're going to start looking at demos. Okay, so when you're thinking about the HRIS marketplace, there's a lot of different vendors. And part of what you need to think about is the origin of that company. Because you can get an HRIS from a lot of different places. So you have companies like payroll companies that offer an HRIS and payroll. They may have Ben Admin. I've seen Cobra administration. But keep in mind that the further the company gets away from their origins, the more likely it is that that additional system is not as strong or was bought, not built, and you may have integration or customer service issues. And I'll explain a little bit more what I'm talking about as I go further in this. So for example, if it was a payroll system that has now added an HRIS, they're probably very strong in those two areas, but I would proceed cautiously in looking at a performance management, a learning management, or a Ben admin system, because now you're starting to get away from payroll and HRIS, which are usually, frankly, your first two systems. And again, they're not going to be as good. So for example, you're going to want to talk about this stuff during the demo and understand where the company started. So you have some standalones. You have Bamboo HR. And again, Bamboo has some other modules that go with it. I've seen their performance review module. And Workday. So these are HRIS that they really started as an HRIS, and they're adding more modules as they build them out. Then you have your payroll companies. ADP offers a very robust suite of systems. I have seen their payroll system. That's what they're known for. They were originally a payroll company. They have an HRIS. They have a couple different levels of HRIS, and they have an applicant tracking system. I believe they also have a Ben admin system. Paylocity is also along those lines. Paychecks is along those lines. But again, these systems, these companies started as payroll companies. So when you start getting into Cobra administration, benefit administration, learning and management development systems, or engagement and recognition, I would be very thoughtful and very direct if you're talking to these companies about those add-ons. Again, did they buy them? Did they build them? Is it a different call center or customer service module? Just understand how they got that robust. You've got engagement and learning companies like Lattice and Kazoo. So they're in much more of your succession planning, engagement, recognition world. But I would be cautious if they're telling you that they have a payroll system. Again, you're going to want to take a look at it, because that's a stretch for an engagement and learning company. Benefit insurance brokers will often have an HRIS, and they'll give it to you as a part of you getting the benefits. Again, some of these systems are very good, and they're particularly good for small companies, but recognize that if you go with one of these systems, as you get bigger, you need to be careful, because these systems can't always grow. Again, they're designed for a smaller market to package the benefits with the HRIS, but it is likely not a system that you'd be able to go over 200 or 250 employees with without having an issue. You've got industry niche. There are HRIS systems that are out there very specific and built to function in specific industries. And then you just have very large, robust HRIS providers like PeopleSoft and UltiPro, which are huge. And again, they're great systems, but if you don't have 10,000 employees, you may not need something this large. And obviously they are often a little more expensive because they can handle huge numbers of employees. They can handle hourly and salary. They can often handle global, etc. So a lot of it is, what do you want? So this is where referrals are big. Now you get on the phone, you can leverage the Go network with a blog or a posting. I would assign selection team members to get referrals. When you're talking to your colleagues to get referrals, think about that HRIS master spreadsheet so you can articulate what you need and understand what they have to make sure it fits. The other piece is do some research on your referrals and read reviews. I mean, you can literally Google best HRIS systems for startups, best HRIS systems for 200 employees, see what pops up. Now you need to get organized and schedule demonstrations. So you've gotten your field of HRISs that you're going to demo. Hold a call with the selection team, reviewing the HRIS assessment form, which again is basically modeled right off your master spreadsheet. Make sure there's clarity on the roles and who's going to ask questions. For example, just be clear on who's going to start. It's usually the HR project lead. And then when are you going to hand it over to IT? Because IT needs to ask the IT questions. If you have a recruiter there and you're thinking about an ATS module, have them ask those questions, etc. Confirm the timeline for demos and ensure your team holds the times. So come up with some times, have people block their calendars, and then that way you can schedule the invites. Otherwise, you're going to be dialing for dollars and checking calendars, and it's going to be crazy. And then be clear on the debrief and report back process in order to populate your master spreadsheet. Schedule your demos, and I would do them quick. I do them within a 1 to 2 week period so you stay fresh. If you have stragglers, then you either have a bit of a halo effect on the first one is the one you love or the last one is the one you love. So put them on top of each other. Schedule anywhere for 45 to 60 minutes. Be clear with the vendor on the time frame. Make sure that you allow time for questions. So if you're going to do a 45-minute demo, tell them you want them to go through the system in 30 and leave 15 for questions, and hold the vendors accountable to the time. Part of it is you want a vendor who's responsive to you and responsive to your concerns. And if they can't stay within the parameter that you gave them on the demo, I'd be a little uncomfortable with that. And then allow time between the demos if you're putting them back to back for the debrief before the next vendor comes in. So minimum 15 minutes. I'd put 30 between it in case you do run a minute or two late. Again, gathering feedback. You don't know if you're going to have agreement from the selection team or not. The project lead, the HR project lead, populates the master spreadsheet. And then once you've seen all your demos, you're going to determine your top 2 or 3. So you're probably going to demo 5 to 7. I'd try to go there. And then narrow it down to your top 2 or 3. And then reach back out to those top 2 or 3, ask for current client references, ask to talk to those current clients. I have been a client reference, and I found it to be a great dialogue with potential customers about what were they looking for, what I liked about the system, and sometimes they were looking for the system to do something I knew it couldn't do. And I would not be shy about bringing those top 2 or 3 or top 2 vendors back for a final demo. Use your selection team to complete the references. And your second demo should be very specific to functionality, cost, and customer service. So there's no map or checklist for the second demo. It should be driven off of what do you have questions about, or what do you think you need to circle back with on that master spreadsheet to narrow down your choice. So now you're going to make your choice, phase 4. So the HR project leader, we've talked about this, should have the final say on the HRIS system. Finance is obviously a huge piece of this. If you want to spend $500,000 and they only want to spend $100,000, that is something that should have been worked out in the selection team, not now. But you guys should be reasonably close so that you can make a final decision. IT obviously has a high level of influence. You need to make sure that this is a system that IT is comfortable with from a security perspective and from a support perspective, depending on how much IT support that you need. But again, HR is the owner and the primary user and most heavily invested in the system. So hence you're the decision maker. And then you should flat out plan on negotiating this HRIS contract. Particularly with COVID and with what's been going on, a lot of companies are not putting, big dollar investments into their systems, and some of these companies are struggling, and so they are willing to negotiate. And obviously, you want to know your top priorities and key items for your contract. So 2 phases: make your decision on your HRIS and then negotiate. So how do you make your choice? HR is the primary user, so again, they should be the one making the decision. Finance, if you need to make sure you are not far apart with finance long before you get to demos. So when you are with your selection team and you are talking about HRIS parameters and you're thinking that this is going to be $250,000 and finance says we have $75,000, that is not something you hammer out in phase 4. That's something you hammer out in phase 2, because obviously it's way too late at this point if you're looking at a system that you cannot get buy-in from finance. So again, you should be within range at this point. IT is obviously critical. Most of the time, in my experience, IT is going to work with you. They're only going to tell you the 1 or 2 things that are required. They are the best assessors of security. Everybody weighs in on the customer service pieces, but at the end of the day, IT is there just to make sure we don't make a poor decision. And then again, the rest of the team weighs in to inform or consult, but it's really HR, finance, and IT who carry the heaviest weight. Once you've made your decision, send an email to the other HRIS vendors to close the loop and thank them for their time. Otherwise, quite frankly, they just might stalk you and continue to email you. So send them that nice note, and then at least you've closed the loop. All right, contract negotiations. This can be negotiated by the HR project lead and or finance. I'd recommend the HR project lead with finance, either facing off with you or behind the scenes. Make sure you know what's critical for you on your items for the contract. And again, there's a lot of things you need to think about, but how long are you willing to commit to this system? They will generally offer you a better deal if you sign a 2 or 3 year contract. That may be fine. If you're not sure, sign the 1 year, but it'll cost you more money. What is the notice to get out? The bigger the system, the longer the requirement on notice to get out of it. Some of the smaller systems, they may be fine with a 30-day notice on the contract. Most of them will automatically renew. So again, you want to make sure you know what you see in that contract, and are you okay with that? Any ongoing maintenance, including the upgrades and updates, how often does that happen? Is there a hidden cost in those upgrades or updates? Did you ask for a customization? If you ask for a customization, you need to check and make sure what that's going to do to the updates. Depending on what you asked for, they may come back and say, well, because of that customization, every time we update, you're going to have to pay X. So again, be thoughtful. The vendor commitment to compliance updates. Obviously, HRIS has a lot of reporting. Part of their reporting is that there is often push button on compliance reports. So there are EEO reports that many states need. There are wage and hour reports that you can often get in payroll, but sometimes are generated better out of HRIS. You may have time off reporting if you're in a state that has paid sick leave requirements. So what is their commitment to keeping those types of compliance reports up to date? Because they are often canned reports to make it easier for you. Ease of data extraction. If you need to change systems, again, not ideal, but how do you get it out? Any additional service fees, taxes, add-ons, etc. Read it with a fine-tooth comb. There will be an implementation fee. That's fine. What is the support? Do they do training support? Is there a project plan? Are there any one-time fees? And how long is that support? Usually 60 to 90 days is what I see. Any vendor performance guarantees, you know, what is their guarantee as far as uptime, and what are they gonna promise if for some reason they go down? And then data confidentiality commitments. Obviously, payroll has a lot of sensitive information, but your HRIS is going to have all of that PHI, the protected information, home addresses, social security numbers are more often in payroll, birth dates, gender, marital status, depending on if it's connecting to Ben admin, you may have some benefit pieces in there. So again, you want to make sure that they have data confidentiality and security that's in there. The other piece is be aggressive with your negotiations. Like I said, a lot of these companies are struggling right now because the rest of us are not spending money on these types of investments. It's just a tough time. And if they are looking to hit numbers at the end of a quarter or the end of the month, they may be willing to make you a better deal. So the first number you hear is absolutely not the number that you should end up with. So plan to negotiate and negotiate aggressively. The last phase is getting ready for implementation. And I'm not going to dive deep into implementation, but now you've got your system. And quite frankly, now you're kicking into a whole nother project, to be very honest with you. So you don't want to delay implementation. As you are finalizing that contract, you should be organize your implementation. So build another plan. What resources do you need? That's not going to be necessarily the same team that you selected. So for example, you had a decision-making level person from finance to pick the HRIS. What you're going to need on implementation is someone who can help with the payroll system. That's probably not your top finance person. That's probably a payroll manager or a payroll administrator, someone who can work through the integration and the mapping of the data fields. You'll need some level of IT. That's critical. And again, depending on what you bought and what other modules and integrations you need from the HRIS, that will often drive who is on your implementation team. It is usually heavy HR people, just because again, you're the primary user. You need to estimate the time that each person will need to put aside for this implementation. They're going to need to do this usually while they're doing their regular day job, as we say. So give them a ballpark of the time, have regular calls scheduled, regular check-ins, perform a project management plan together with milestones, and make sure that the people who are on the team are committed to hitting those times. Understand the support you're going to get from your vendor. They will often give you a general project management with goals that you can work off of to make it even more detailed. And then what's their guarantee to make sure that it's working the way you expect, to make sure that it's right before they disengage. And then what's your communication and training plan? You're going to have super users who are your administrators, who are, the all-powerful Oz in the system. And then you're going to have various other levels of view, access, and administration in the system. And who's going to train? The vendor doesn't usually train. Sometimes they do, but they don't usually. So usually you need to develop the training in-house. So who's going to do that? And then finally, communicate and training to managers and employees, because HRIS has self-service. So employees can go in, they can request time off, and managers can approve it if that's something that has been important to you. They can change addresses and managers will approve that. It can funnel to payroll. They can do online W-4 changes. Benefit administration is done online. All of this is done online. So there's a lot of self-service that's built into these systems, which is helpful from getting rid of paper and taking care of burdens, but people need to be trained. And I will tell you, it's tempting to do this via email. That's not the best way to do it. So work out your training plans, who's going to do that, and what the timeline is to get all of that done also. So how long for each phase? I threw out 6 months. The planning phase, it takes about a month for you to build your model, maybe go back and forth with finance on pricing to make sure you're not, really, really far apart. Build your team, get the team organized, your master spreadsheet, build out that model further, get everybody on the same page, build out the assessment sheet. Then you go to your systems in your demo. This is your research. So you're researching, you're calling your colleagues, you're gathering that information, you're trying to figure out which systems you're going to bring in for demos. And then you're going to bring the demos in. And again, get them in a tight time frame. But this is a lot of work in phase 3. Phase 4, this should be quick. You're now down to your probably top 2. I would say maybe 3, but top 2, you may bring them back in, and these you really want coming in on top of each other. And then you're going to decide, and now you're going to negotiate your contract. So again, strike while the iron is hot, push that vendor on that pricing, and let's get the deal signed now that we've decided, and then get ready to implement. Again, and it doesn't show it on the screen, but you should be thinking implementation in phase 4 as you're developing the details of the phase 5 implementation. So it's not a hard and fast, but it usually takes you about a month between you get the contract, they assign a project manager, you develop a kickoff date. There's just time. There's time involved. And then takes about a month to organize your implementation. And then, as I said to you, the actual implementation phase, they usually support you 60 to 90 days. And so again, just put that in the back of your head from a timing perspective. In the appendix, we've got a couple things, and again, you'll have access to this, but to help you build your master spreadsheet, we've got a list of sample HRIS features that are available, again, to get you thinking. Here's questions for you. Again, I didn't go into tremendous detail, but what do you need to be thinking about as you do your planning as the HR person, you're building your model? And again, how ready are you for the reporting? What are you looking for? Do you change other systems? Is there anything else you don't need or you don't want? So again, I didn't dive this deep into the presentation today, but we'll share this deck, and obviously you then have a little more information when you're doing your thinking and your planning. And again, I wrote a blog about this. This is not the phase you should short, and there's collateral via links in that blog that again can help you work through some of that. And then here's your must-haves, your nice-to-haves, and your wish list. Again, a little bit more detail to help you work through what those critical pieces are for building your master spreadsheet with your team. Okay.
Thank you so much, Deb. Yeah, that was so informative. I'm ready to embark on this journey now. I learned a lot. So if anyone does have a question, please enter them now in the Q&A module. We'll have a few minutes just to answer your questions. One that we did see come in is, do you have a recommendation for a few vendors that are a highly scalable HRIS solution?
Highly scalable. ADP. ADP. And again, don't stretch ADP too far. They're going to tell you that they can do everything, but not all of it. A lot of people start with Workforce Now, which has some HRIS type capabilities with good payroll, and then they will transition that into ADP's Enterprise, which can handle very large organizations. I've also heard good things about Paylocity, but I do not know how big, I don't have personal experience as to how big Paylocity can get, where it starts to become an issue. I've also heard good things about Bamboo HR, but again, those are the types of questions I think I would really dig deep with the vendor, asking specifically, what is the smallest customer base that you handle? What is the biggest customers that you handle? Do you have a customer that has been with you from 100 employees up to 10,000 employees? And that would absolutely be a customer you'd want to talk to when you did references. And I'd ask them where their sweet spot is. That where is that system really built? And if they give you an answer of, oh, well, we can handle anything, obviously that's not true. So, again, don't just look at the ones I named. Those are the ones that I think could be scalable, but I think that is also a great question for the HRIS systems as they demo.
Wonderful. Another question. Today we have a combination of local HR solutions, some homegrown, and outsourced payroll. How likely is it that we will find a global HR solution that would allow for seamless integration with these payroll solutions?
So you have multiple payroll solutions? Is
A
that
combination of local, yes. Thank you. Very fast response. Thank you. Yes, multiple.
I'd give it a 50-50. Anything homegrown is going to be trouble. You're now talking about a proprietary system, and that's going to put a heavy burden on the internal IT to build some kind of a bridge. And there's generally issues with that. I guess my first thought would be, you'll find something that will talk to, I think you should find something that will talk to your biggest payroll vendor. So I think that's where I would focus it. Again, thinking about the biggest bang for the buck. So I would want to, and hopefully that's not the proprietary one. I would focus it that direction. And then I guess my next question would be is, do you have to keep all of those payroll vendors, or should you be looking at a payroll vendor that can, if not handle all of your global needs, handle most of them? Which means you probably need to look at one of the big payroll companies and the HRIS that would come with those. That's my thought on those.
Wonderful, thank you. Hopefully that answered your question. If not, feel free to type back in. Another question, what are some common challenges that you see with migration to a new HRIS system?
The biggest issue is that your own data is not clean. So you need to make sure that your data is clean. So you need to scrub what you already have. So make sure that your employee statuses are good, that your job codes are defined between hourly and salary, and it's clean, so you don't have a salaried person and an hourly person in the same job code or job title. Are your department and your hierarchy, is that clean? Is your payroll information clean? If you're moving demographics, do you have birthdays and gender and marital status and all the other information that you need? So that is your biggest issue, because when you go to do a data migration, they have to map the data fields, and that's part of where your vendor will help you. But then when they go to transfer the data via that mapping, if you have, for example, if you have an hourly and a salaried person tied to the same job code, that new system might not take it, and you're going to end up with a massive exception list. So the biggest issue is to get your data as clean as possible and consistent as possible in your current system before you try to migrate it over. That's the biggest issue.
Great, thank you. Another question. We are 230 employees across 4 countries, and we use Namely. So far, so good. At what employee size would you suggest looking at a Workday type system?
I'd say over 1,000, but I would go back to Namely, since it's working well, and ask them where their sweet spot is, and ask them for client references for larger companies to try to get a feel for how long you can ride Namely, especially if it's working well.
Great, that's helpful. Any other questions? We have 3 more minutes. Otherwise, we'll give you 3 more minutes back in your day. And then in the interim, if you missed the housekeeping, we will be sharing an email after this with the recording, the slides, the blog that Deb had mentioned that she wrote for Insight's blog, as well as access to Insight's Go Scale Up platform, where we have a vendor directory with vendors like ADP who provided discounts to you all. So feel free to check that out. Doesn't seem like we have any other questions. Thank you so much, Deb. This was really informative, and hope everyone enjoyed it and found it valuable. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.